Let's talk about the type of loans there are, the type of financing options there are, the way you can purchase a home with money. First is FHA, second is VA, third is USDA, fourth is conventional, fifth is cash hard money financing, and sixth is paying cash for the home. So let's talk about each one of these options. First is FHA. FHA financing can actually have severe restrictions on what you're able to do. Number one is if you have a more expensive home, FHA can't fund it. In most cases, their funding limit is $417,000. So this can be different on a city-to-city basis, but FHA financing actually has restrictions on how much they can actually fund or loan on a home. Secondly, you normally will sign what's called an FHA addendum, which has restrictions or requirements on that. Third, normally the down payment on an FHA loan is extremely low, and the reason for that is your buyer is normally weak. They do not have enough money to put up to be able to purchase the home in the first place in most cases. In fact, that's one of the reasons why the housing debacle occurred back in 2006, 7, and 8 is because a lot of the financing that was done was given to FHA buyers. However, the government consistently still lends to these types of people. So it creates a weaker buyer in the marketplace. These types of buyers are more prone to foreclosure, etc., because they're not coming with any money to the table or what we would know as skin in the game. The other thing is with an FHA, the thing that's most critical about that type of buyer is an FHA buyer is going to get an appraisal. And the number one killer with FHA buyers is once they get an appraisal, if that appraisal comes in low, let's say they agree to buy your house for $250,000 and the appraisal comes back in at $230,000, that appraisal sticks and resides and is assigned with the property. You can go get a second appraisal to see if it does any better, but at the end of the day, you're stuck with that appraisal. If you don't accept that offer, the next FHA buyer has to use that same appraisal as part of the analysis of your underwriter and whether they're going to fund that loan or not. So oftentimes an FHA buyer will come in and say, hey, listen, we'll buy this property for the most money. We'll pay you $250,000. Everyone else is sitting at $240,000. And the reason the agent says that is because they know in the back of their mind that once that appraisal comes in, they're going to line you up right into the amount of money that comp is for, that appraisal is for that house. They're going to line you right up into what the appraisal comes into that home. So they're going to let the appraiser do the negotiation for you by getting them to come in low on the home, and they don't have to tell them anything. It's just simply if an FHA appraiser comps your house or appraises your house for less than it's worth, that's going to stick with your record, and the agent knows that. An FHA buyer can actually come in and make the highest offer, knowing that at the end of the day the appraiser is going to counter you down on the sale of your home. So in this example, if you have a $250,000 offer and the appraisal comes in at $230,000, you'll lose a $20,000 delta on your home. Okay, now the second thing to notice about that is with that FHA requirement, which is really important, the appraiser, with an FHA loan, the appraiser becomes a significant part of the negotiation. Who would think that? My goodness, an outside source affects your appraisal, right? Or the outside source can affect how much your house sells for. And any good agent that knows what they're doing will use that FHA appraisal to counter you down on the amount that they're going to pay for your home. And so they're going to go into contract with you for $250,000. If that appraisal comes in low, which they hope and pray it does, and the reason why is if it does, they're going to come in and say this to you. Hey, listen, you don't have to accept my buyers if you don't want to, but let me just tell you that if you don't, the next FHA buyer that comes in to buy your home will have to stick with that same appraisal. So every real estate agent knows this that has a brain in their head or is experienced, and that real estate agent knows that they can counter you via appraisal, and you will have to accept that number, especially if your buying pool is all FHA buyers. So this becomes a real sticking point as a seller for you if you're trying to sell a home, because the appraisal is going to dictate what happens with that, and no one has any control as to which appraiser is going to hit your house. So if it's a guy that conservatively comps your house or appraises your home, you're going to end up selling that home for less. Okay, so FHA, biggest sticking point that I see is the fact that they can counter you with a third party that has nothing to do with the sale of the home other than they're just simply your appraisal. So FHA buyers, I'm not going over all of the things that they have, but I'm going over the major ones, which is, number one, they're the weakest, and number two, they're going to get you on appraisal. Let's move on next to VA. This isn't an exhaustive list of all of the things that these financial institutions can require of you. These are some of the high points that you need to pay attention to that can affect the sale of your home. So let's next talk about VA. VA is a loan that's primarily given, or it is given to someone who's been in the service of our country. It's military. So what that means is they can also come in with little to nothing down. At the end of the day, they may even get 100% finance from the government based on the fact that they used to serve the country in the military. These loans can be extremely painful, and the reason why is not only can they get you on appraisal, but they can also get you on the type of addendums you have to sign. As an example, on a VA loan, they're going to have you sign a document that basically says that their money cannot be taken as a deposit. So if they come in and they make an offer and put money down, that money doesn't stick with you. It's going to go back to them if they decide to bail on you, because at the end of the day, the addendum that you're going to sign is going to say that. There are other things that control, especially on an FHA VA, but especially VA. And the reason I say that is because when the appraiser comes out to appraise your home, anything the appraiser identifies, not the building inspector, but if the appraiser says your railing is not there, when a step's too high, or a window's bad, or they give you some type of thing that you have to fix, if it goes on the appraisal, you're fixing it. Yep, that's right. So the appraiser, once again, dictates not only what your house will sell for, but what you got to fix on your home. Now that's normally what happens with a building inspector, and you can go back and forth and negotiate that. But at the end of the day, the VA, if it's on the appraisal, you got to fix it. How do you like that one? So once again, we see that on these types of lending institutions, FA and VA, they can be extremely controlling. Watch out for your appraisals. Watch out for what they're going to tell you to do to fix or repair that home, and these things cannot be waived. Okay? And so just a little bit about those two. In both cases, both of those buyers, FHA and VA, are in most cases buyers that are not going to bring any money to the table. Now, unlike an FHA loan, a VA loan can have a buyer that has cash or money in the bank, but at the end of the day, they just want to use their best loan. Once again, this is not an extensive or exhaustive list of all the things a lending institution and the requirements they may put upon their buyer or you as the seller. These are just a few highlights that show you what can affect the purchase of your home by the lender that your buyer picks. The third type of buyer is a conventional buyer, and conventional buyers start to become much stronger. And the reason why is conventional loans usually have a greater down payment or deposit with the buyer. So as an example, if they're buying a $400,000 home and they put 20% down, which is $80,000, now you're talking about a buyer that's strong. Someone who's coming in and putting some of their own money or skin in the game to be able to purchase this home. So we like a conventional buyer because a conventional buyer usually borrows about 80% of the loan, comes in with a large amount of down payment on the property, so they tend to be a better buyer. Also with conventional loans, they can be done by regional banks, local banks, credit unions, and many financial institutions or lenders who have much more leniency on what they will or won't accept. And the reason for that is normally their buyer is much stronger. So they're not going to hit you as hard on an appraisal or these types of things. Now don't get me wrong, every agent that's worth their salt is going to counter you on appraisal. So whether it's an FHA loan or a USDA loan or a VA loan or a conventional loan, any of these guys are going to come in and counter you on appraisal. It's one of the tools or tricks that the agents have in their toolbox to get you to accept a lower offer. Oh, by the way, on the conventional loan, also they can have higher loan limits. So a conventional loan can give you a loan for $2 million on the purchase of a $2.5 million home. So conventional has the ability to go above the cap that an FHA loan does have, and that varies from city to city, but as a general rule is $417,000. So conventional loans have the ability to go further and get you to a better place, is the best place to put it. Okay, the next one is a hard money lender. If a buyer is using a hard money lender, that usually means it's probably going to be a short-term loan. It's one where they're going to bridge. Okay, so they're going to come in and buy your house, take it down, and then pay a higher rate of interest, say anywhere between 8 to 18%, anywhere from 1 to 5 points as an example. So it's hard money. You're going to pay to get it because it's hard money, and so it's not soft money like a lender. It's going to be hard money. In other words, your costs are going to be expensive. But at the end of the day, this type of a lender usually gives investors money to buy because they're going to renovate and flip a home, or they're going to buy a house and then renovate it and then hold the house and rent it out. So oftentimes you see a hard money lender come into the picture when the buyer is an investor in nature, and their goal is to come in, buy that house, get it renovated, and then refinance it or flip it out to the market quickly. And so hard money loans are used primarily in the investor area of the market, and they're used as different types of transitional funding or short-term funding, or funding where it's just going to be there long enough for them to get to their next step, whether it be to refinance it or to flip it and then get the money out of the property and go to the next one and pay that lender off. So hard money gives you great flexibility, and the reason why is that lender could be funding 100% of the asset. The buyer could be coming in with large amounts of cash as well too. They could have no appraisal conditions. You could have a house that's falling down and the roof's falling apart and the house is falling apart, and the lender will lend on that property because they know that they're lending to someone who can take care of that asset and move it up and get it renovated and where it needs to go. So hard money lending is based more on the character and the asset of the individual person rather than some type of standard that's promulgated by a financial institution or a government. So hard money lending is a way to go if you're a buyer. So if you're selling to someone who has hard money, the odds are extremely high they're going to close unless they find an inspection issue that stops them in the purchase of that property. The last and final type of money that gets a home closed is cash. This takes no financing, and obviously with cash, they could close tomorrow. They could sign the offer today, and literally you could hand them the keys tomorrow and they could move in. Your closing company might take you a little longer, or your closing attorney might take you a little longer. But at the end of the day, cash buyers are your best buyers from the perspective of they don't require any appraisal. The money's right there ready to go. There is no lending or financing requirement. The cash buyer can basically walk in and take down your house without any problem. I'll give you an example of this. In Raleigh, we had a house that was in North Raleigh. We listed on the market, and we got several offers. We had like over 200 showings, I believe. We had probably 30, 40 offers, whatever it was. There was no inventory in the neighborhood whatsoever. We were the only house on the market, and we had a buyer that came in and offered us $305,000 cash. They closed in 2 weeks, and they did 0 inspections because they weren't required to. And they wanted that home, and they knew in order to get that house, they had to come in strong, and they had to come in with no inspections, and they had to come in a way that basically said, we're your buyers, hey, we're your buyers, right? So at the end of the day, a cash buyer can be completely strong and a good option. However, be careful of cash buyers. And the reason is because cash buyers can also play with you. So they can come in as the strongest buyer, and once they come in on your home, and they come in and make an offer on your home, and you say, I got a cash buyer, they're the best ones I want to go with, right? Then the next thing they do is they're going to come in and hammer you on repairs and beat you to no end until you're breathless. And then secondly, they're going to also get an appraisal and have the appraiser, because as a cash buyer, they can pick who their appraiser is. Imagine that. When it's a financing buyer, they have to use whoever comes from the pool. But when you're a cash buyer, you can pick your own appraiser. And if you pick your own appraiser, you can say to Joe down the street, hey, can you go and appraise that house low for me, or find as many things wrong as you can, so that at the end of the day, you come back with a low appraisal. So be cautious with the cash buyers. The cash buyers that I normally stay away from most, whether they like it or not, and they see and hear this post, is a rental company who's a cash buyer. Rental companies that are cash buyers are notoriously known for coming in and making the highest offer They have experienced contractors that work for them, and then after they make the offer, they come in and beat you to death on your repairs and on your appraisal. So cash buyers can be your best buyer, but they can also be your worst nightmare. Okay, so looking at these 6 different types of options for purchasing your home, it's pretty clear now that the lender that the buyer picks can affect you as the seller on the sale of your home. This is extremely important to remember. What we do is we use and deploy several strategies that we think are great that work. Number 1 is your FHA buyer is the one who is most likely to make your highest offer. And the reason they are is because they know they're in the weakest position. Every real estate agent knows that if they have an FHA buyer, especially in this market where it's hot, the odds are that they're not going to get the deal. So the only way they can get the deal is if they offer you the highest price and their agent is the nicest real estate agent to the seller's agent, right? So FHA is great because you can use them in ways that are different than accepting their offer. Now, they may also be your best buyer, don't get me wrong on that. So as an example, if you're an FHA buyer, number 1, they know they're in the weakest on the totem pole, but they're probably the family that wants the house the most, potentially, and so they're going to stay in and hang in with whatever it takes to get that house purchased, where someone who's conventional or cash could say, this is just too tired, I'm going to move on. So I'm not going to kick FHA completely down the road. An FHA buyer may be your buyer, depending on who they are. That's why I like to do a lot of intel on a sell. If someone comes in and makes an offer on my properties, I want my real estate agent or broker to go out and say, hey, listen, tell me more about your buyer. What's their job? What kind of money do they make? How solid are they? Are they a family? Do they love this home? Is it just something that is an investment for them? It's a weekend home? I want to know all about that buyer. Because if I know all about that buyer, then I know their passion to the home. I know exactly what they're talking about. In today's market, you can even get letters from FHA buyers where they say, this is Providence that we're buying this home. It's the home we've dreamed about owning, and my kids and my wife and my family are going to love it, and there's no other home on earth that's as great as your home. So a lot of times you'll get a letter from an FHA buyer who really tells you, and the letter can come from anyone in this type of a market, but at the end of the day, the FHA buyer is your weakest buyer, hands down, and so they are most likely to make your highest offer. An agent who is smart will tell them to make a high offer because they know at the end of the day they're going to tell them to counter on appraisal and get that number back down where they want it to go. So FHA buyers got to watch out for them, especially their agents. FHA buyers, watch out for that real estate agent, because if that real estate agent knows or broker knows that they can count on appraisal, then they'll pull that card later on out at you, right? And so FHA can be your best buyer. Okay, cash can be your best buyer. But what I like to do when I'm looking for buyers, me personally, is I like to get everyone to come in and make their offers. And what I do is I leverage the highest offer, which is normally an FHA buyer, against my strongest buyer, which is a cash buyer. So I'm going to go back and say to the cash buyer, if my FHA's made an offer at $250 and my cash buyer is sitting there at $230, I'm going to go back to the cash buyer and say, or the conventional buyer, who are my strongest buyers, and say, listen, we have other offers over here that are for more than you, so if you want to stay in the game, you're going to have to get your number up. So I like to leverage the FHA buyer against, or a VA buyer, or even a USDA buyer, which, by the way, I didn't talk about USDA. So the FHA buyer, I'm going to use his number, if it's the highest offer, against my conventional or cash offer to try to get them to come up to that FHA buyer's number. So I leverage the FHA buyer against the cash or conventional buyer so that I use their higher offer to leverage them up on the cash and conventional side. Now, if you have a smart real estate broker, they're going to ask, hey, listen, the buyer you're telling us that you have that's making the highest offer, what type of a lender are they using? What type of a lender are they using? And that's a smart question by the agent or the broker, because then that allows them to size up who your competition is. They also would know then that there's appraisal conditions and other things. So a conventional or cash buyer may say, go pound sand, we're okay that that other buyer is higher, because at the end of the day they know that that other buyer is really not their strongest buyer, and so they're going to beat you with the cash, right? So these are things that you can do to counter it. Now, one other thing that I need to tell you about today is a USDA buyer. A USDA buyer is similar to an FHA or a VA buyer in that they have many government restrictions, appraisals can control, and there are many things that they're going to require, strings that attach that can affect you. A USDA buyer is a buyer who's coming in normally from a rural type area. USDA normally lends out in the rural areas, and so because of that, they give them good financing conditions. With a USDA buyer, it also normally takes them longer to close. So they're not going to get it done in 30 days. It could take even as long as 90 days to go with a USDA buyer. Okay, so keep that in mind. USDA is very similar. A USDA buyer is normally a rural buyer in a rural area of the country or towns. They have a lot of the similar requirements that an FHA buyer or a VA buyer is similar to a USDA buyer. I pretty much put all of those buyers in the same tranche or in the same group. Just simply put, they're not normally your best buyer from a financial position. However, keep in mind the FHA, the VA, and the USDA buyer may be your most passionate buyer and the one that's most likely to accept things that they would not otherwise accept if they were cash or conventional. What I mean by that is their FHA requirements is an example on what you have to do to get the home sold. As an example, if you have a porch that's above 2 feet, it requires a railing on it. And so with FHA, they could say you got to put a railing up, as an example, or if there's a cracked window. However, an FHA buyer may be more lenient on all the ticky-tacky stuff that they want you to fix, such as bad flooring or carpet or wall paint or whatever it is that they're going to come in and counter you on that they think you need to fix. They're going to be more lenient there because they know they're not the strongest buyer. So there's some trade-offs too between the buyers. What I think you need to do that's the most critical thing if you have the right real estate agent working for you is to make sure that you get the intel of your buyer. It's your turn and time to interview your buyer. So what you want to do is get to that agent after they've made the offer and say, tell me about your buyer. And if you have a good real estate agent or broker, tell me about your buyer. Because at the end of the day, if you get a bad buyer, it can make all the difference in the world. So not only is it the financing conditions that affect you, but the type and the mentality of the buyer. As a general rule, I stay away from rental companies who are buyers. And the reason for that is they've been known to play the most tricks or games in the book to get your home. Now, that's not always the case. There are rental buyers out there that will come out, pay you cash for it in the condition your home is, and not counter you on appraisal or repair. I think those guys are fewer and farther between. Let me leave off with a story today, and that is this. I had a guy that picked up the phone and called me the other day and said, hey, Craig, I need you to give me some advice about a property that I have that's out in a rural area of North Carolina. In fact, it's up in Roanoke Rapids area, which, by the way, that's right on the Virginia border. And Roanoke Rapids is known as being a depressed area, whether it's a high market or a low market. No one wants to live there, basically. So at the end of the day, this guy picked up the phone and he called me and said, hey, listen, I got a house I want to sell. How do I sell that house? And what is it I do with this home to get it gone? And he goes, how much renovation should I do? And what I told him is I said, listen, and this is a very critical principle I'm going to talk about now, and that is you got to let the market speak to you. That's what I often tell people is let the market speak to you. So what I told this gentleman is I said, listen, what you want to do is go in and look at all of the houses that are in your neighborhood and see to what level of renovation they did. If you're in a depressed area, there's two things you could see. You could see people that go in and renovate their house to the nines to try to get it sold because no one will buy it. But that's not likely. Normally what happens in a depressed area is that all the homes don't renovate because they don't see a need to, because they can't get the money out of it. And so when you let the market speak to you, what you do is you go out and look at the houses in your neighborhood that have sold or that are for sale, and you see how much they're renovating, how much they're staging, what are they doing with their home to sell it based on the current market conditions. I think what he'll find up in Roanoke Rapids is that the houses are being sold in an as-is condition with very little renovation. So if he goes in and he renovates his home, he's going to over-renovate for the area. You want to make sure that you don't over-renovate or you don't under-renovate in an area. You want to renovate like everyone else. You often get buyers that come in and say, oh, I'm going to build the Taj Mahal because everyone will love my house and buy it. Don't fall into that trap. You're going to end up in a position where that appraisal will come in based on what every other home in the area is, and they can't support that value. So at the end of the day, let the market speak to you. Okay? The market will tell you what it is that you're supposed to do. It'll tell you how many days on the market your house will last, because if you go look at all the other homes that have sold and you look at the condition of them, you're going to be able to tell, and if they were priced right or not. That market's going to tell you how long it's going to take to sell that home, what you're going to sell it for, how you should renovate it, and many other things that you're going to tell about that market if you let that market speak to you. So in this case, that's exactly what I told this guy. I said, let the market speak to you. Go look at comps, see what the situation is, evaluate your home, and then list it on the market based on the premise or the guidance that I've given you. At the end of our conversation, I said to him, by the way, I have a broker that will list and sell your house. Because we're investors, we don't pay a full 3% commission. We pay anywhere from 1 to 1.5% commission to our agents or brokers, because they're seller agents and they do volume. So they sell multiple homes all the time. They don't need to do any marketing, anything like that. So basically they're in there to get your house sold. So they're kind of a brass tacks and nuts type of agent or broker that lists and sell our homes. So we get them at a 1.5% because they're going to make their money on volume rather than on a single house sell. So in this particular case, I said to him, hey, listen, if you want to use our broker, I make no money. At the end of the day, use them, and I'll help guide them through the sale to get you your best price. And he said to me, well, you know, there's this little old lady, just joking, we don't know if it's a little old lady, but there's this little old lady that lives next door who happens to be a real estate agent that I've been working with that says that she'll sell my home for me. Guys, let me just tell you. No disrespect to the little old ladies out there, because I have an agent that's a super duper agent who's older, not much older, but older. Okay, so no pun intended on them as far as that perspective. But at the end of the day, don't let your seller pick an agent that's a friend or in the community, or you want to help them because they've helped you. Real estate agents or brokers are notoriously known for going in and befriending you and helping you so that they can get the deal. At the end of the day, the agent you pick or the broker you pick, if they don't know what they're doing and they're not following the model that I've showed you how to do, and they don't understand the buying and selling techniques, which most don't remember, you're going to end up with a problem. Here's what I said to that guy. I said to him, if you use that real estate agent or broker, you will lose between $15,000 and $20,000. His comment back to me is, I don't like that agent that much. And that is the right answer. At the end of the day, there are specific selling and buying techniques that if your real estate agent or broker does not adhere to or know, you're going to lose money. And in this case, it was the friend next door. Okay? Don't fall for that trap. The person that you want to sell your home is the one that's going to get you the most money in the shortest amount of time. That's the person you want. Because the business, you're not selling your home to make your real estate agent happy, and you're not selling your home because you want to make the neighborhood happy. You're selling your home so you can get out of it and make as much money as you possibly can so you can go buy your next home or do whatever it is you're going to do with that money. All right? So in this particular case, it's extremely critical that you hire the right type of agent. Two most fundamental things that I always talk about is a buyer is going to counter you on repairs and appraisal. If that agent is worth their weight in salt. I recently had an agent that was in Texas who came to me and said, Craig, the buyer wants an $11,000 cash concession because they found your air conditioning doesn't work. It didn't work. We fixed it. It should have been fixed at the time. Long story short on that one. But at the end of the day, and by the way, just so you know, have your house ready to sell when you put it on the market to sell. Get rid of all the ticky-tack stuff. And make sure your toilets are working and they're not rocking and the valve doesn't work. Make sure your trim on your lights is on. Make sure your air conditioning is repaired so that when that house gets listed, it's ready to shine. Because if you show that house like my client did when they didn't have it all the way ready. By the way, just so I back up on this, I now have a standard that before a home is listed, I want my contractor to walk it to make sure everything is done and in order. So there are no missed air conditioning units that are missing or not happening right or not working right. Or there are no light fixtures that are hung cattywampus or trim or plumbing or you name it. Really, before you list your home, you ought to have a contractor go through and check that house top to bottom for you. Make sure everything's ready to sell. Second thing, that real estate agent or broker, if they're worth their weight in salt, what they're going to do is come in and tell you to get rid of that accent wall that you thought was cool back in the 1970s. Okay, so a good real estate broker is going to come in and tell you how to get that house ready to show so that it's sparkling great. So if you don't get those renovations done all the way or you leave a few things undone, then your seller's going to beat you up. Now, this happened unintentionally because what happened is, as we went to list that home, the air conditioning was not working. And it stopped right as they listed the home. So not much you can do about that. Buyer comes in, makes an offer, and says, we don't like your air conditioning, so now it's 18 years old, you need to replace it. And we say, no, go pound sand. We're holding firm, our price is right, and you can buy it the way it is. Or whatever it is you tell them. Okay, so at the end of the day, there's two things you want to watch for. Counter on repairs. They'll beat you to death on those. And the second one is counter on appraisal. You guys might have heard me say this in a prior video. They're going to beat you up on appraisal and repair. Let me tell you what I tell my real estate agent or my real estate broker to tell a buyer. What I have them say is, listen, my buyer is going to give you no cash concession. Okay? Pay attention to that. And I don't just have my agent tell them once. I have my agent or broker tell the buyer's agent multiple times, we are not giving cash concessions. So if your goal is to get us to come down another $10,000 so you can go on a Disneyland trip, it ain't happening with us. Okay? At the end of the day, we do not accept cash concessions as an option almost all the time. Now notice I left a little bit of caveat there. If we have $10,000 of repairs to do that we know we got to do, and they come in and offer us a $1,000 concession, we'll take it. But I can guarantee you that's not normally what they do with concessions. They come in and tell you all of the things that are wrong with your house and how it's about ready to fall down, and then they come in and layer you up with a high concession price. This is exactly what this real estate agent did. Okay, now our real estate broker or agent is prepped to say right when they go under contract, listen, my client does not do cash concessions. They are a sophisticated seller. They have an on-staff team that does their repairs. Now you might ask, why do I do these things? The reason we say we have an on-staff team that's going to do the repairs is what the agent will come back and say is, we want a licensed contractor who bids your property and we want them to do the repairs so that we can make sure everything is done right. Okay? What that's going to do is cost you money to go change that light fixture out that's wrong or crooked. You're not going to do that. That's why we say we have an on-staff team that basically does all your repairs. We want that buyer's agent to know that we're not going to be submitting a whole bunch of invoices with them and contracts to them of licensed contractors that we've used to fix the ceiling fixture that's cattywampus, etc. Okay, so that's number one, is we say we're going to use an in-house team. There's a lot of repairs that we can get done where we don't have to have a licensed contractor who's going to charge us more money to do it. Okay, so number one, we're going to say right out the gate, our internal team is going to do the repairs on the home. Okay, secondly, we're going to go in and we're going to tell them that you don't get money concessions. Don't come back and ask us for cash. And don't beat us up on repairs. We'll come in and make the reasonable repairs that we agreed to, you and I, the buyer and the seller agreed to, we'll make the reasonable repairs. Okay? And so that's the second thing we say is we'll make the reasonable repairs. We're not going to give you cash concessions. So if you're even thinking about doing that with our buyer, you might as well cancel the contract and go home. That's called a takeaway, by the way. If you tell them to cancel the contract and go home, they're going to say, no, wait, we want that home, right? So at the end of the day, what you're going to do is you're going to say to them, we do not give money concessions. Okay, now, just so you understand how critical this is, all real estate agents and brokers, or almost all of them, believe in money concessions. And the reason is this. Cash concessions is something that all real estate agents, notice what I said there, all real estate agents, so cash concessions are something that almost all real estate agents like and want. Notice the way I said that. I didn't just include the buyer's agent, I included your agent. Okay? Now why is that? I don't know too many real estate agents that get that inspection report and say, hey, let me plow through it and see how these guys treated you on your repair request. Right? Real estate agents normally say, oh, that's up to you to look at your repair request, right? Agents don't want to deal with that stuff. It's much easier for them to get you to accept a concession. That way there's no arguing about repairs. It's over with, and it's good for both agents. It's good for your agent because they can move on with the transaction and get it closed so they can get their money. It's great for the buyer's agent. They just got their buyer a discount so they can go to Disneyland. So both agents on both sides will have a tendency to want to do money concessions. So what did I just tell you? Your own real estate agent is going to be working against you on what it is that's best for you and what you want. Did you just understand what I said there? The other thing is there's all kinds of arguments. You got to go find a contractor who can come in and get the work done right away, and because of that, it will take too long, and so you should just take the cash concession. Cash concessions is a tool that both sides will use consistently because they see it as their best way out. It gets a Disneyland trip for the buyer, and the seller, the agent, doesn't have to work as hard. If you had a really good real estate agent or broker, they might just be looking at that inspection report with you and going over it with you and educating you as to what really needs to be fixed and what's a bunch of hogwash, right? But those kinds of brokers and agents are hard to find. Okay, so keep in mind that cash concessions is something we don't do. The other thing we do is this. What I tell my sellers to do is, I say, the minute you get your inspection repair request, go do the repairs you're going to do. Don't counter with the repairs you're going to do. Go get them done. And so what I say is, have your contractor lined up so that the minute that offer comes in and it's accepted and the inspector comes in, have your contractor go in the day after you get the inspection report. Let me tell you how this benefits you. Normally when an agent or a broker comes in and gives you a repair request, they expect there to be some time to negotiate back and forth as to what everyone's going to do, see if they can get those cash concessions, and so you can kind of stretch that period out. Now sometimes there may be an option period or some kind of period that limits the amount of time that everyone has to get it done, so you got to pay attention to that as well too, and you may even need to extend it depending on the type of financial ramifications it puts you in. But as a general rule, my recommendation is the day the inspector shows up, have your contractor lined up to come as soon as that inspection report's in. And here's why. You're going to walk that house with him the day after you get it. You're going to go through everything and say, I want you to fix all these things, and go fix them all. Then. So spend a day or two or three or whatever it takes with your contractor getting everything fixed that you want to get fixed, that you're going to fix. The value of this is this. If you go back and you start negotiating the repairs with the agent, agents don't like to do that, but if they're forced to do it because it's in your best interest, they'll go back and start to negotiate the repairs. Okay, what I like to do is send the contractor in there, get all the repairs done, and then go to my agent and say, the repairs we're willing to do have already been completed. How does that sound, guys? You're going back to the buyer's agent and saying, the repairs we're willing to do have already been completed. What argument does it leave the buyer's agent then? Much harder for them to come back in and say, well, we want cash concessions, or this or that or the other. When you beat them to the punch and you go in and you get all the repairs done, they're like, oh. And it slips their mind at that point, and they think, well, I got to hire an inspector to go back and look at it, which they really don't want to do right now. So they'll take that answer and move on, and you just save yourself a whole lot of money and a whole lot of pain through the negotiation. Remember, the strategy there is the repairs are done to your buyer's agent. Huge value and tactic there. The other thing is that it takes the tensions out of the negotiation. If you go in and get the repairs done and you say, I've done the repairs I'm willing to do, then they have to go look back and see what it is that you did, and now they're focused on seeing the repairs are done. It takes the edge off the negotiation because no one's arguing or fighting about what concessions are or are not going to be given, or what repairs are or are not going to be done. They're just simply talking about, hey, let's go check what they did. And that's the cool thing, is you're putting the attention in the place it really needs to go, and you're eliminating these frictional arguments that can kill a deal. And so it puts you on the upper hand. Most buyers' agents are looking at the repairs as some type of a leveraged negotiation on you as the seller. So keep that in mind. By the way, everything I'm talking about today is if you're in the seller position. Guess what, guys? If you're in the buyer's position, you use every tactic and strategy that I told you to use against the seller as a seller that we're now countering on as a buyer, right? So at the end of the day, what you're going to do is switch positions if you're the buyer. If you're the buyer, you're going to go in and beat them up at repairs. Yes, I use that term, beat them up, so I know that'll go all over the internet. But at the end of the day, you're going to go in and beat them up on repairs. Why do I use that term? I'm calling it what it is. Because a lot of these agents use their inspection reports. They will actually go out and have dinner with their favorite inspector, because that inspector makes them money and their client money. If they can sell their house, or if they can buy the house for less, and the agent gets their commission and they save their client money, they can go tell all the other friends and everyone else to use this agent because they have some solid tactics. So if you're on the buyer side, you're going to go in and beat them up on repairs. I just sat here and told Danny, who's doing the videoing for me, I said to him, I see you're wanting to buy a house, you can beat them up on repairs, right? If you're the buyer, you're going to pound them on renovations, and you're going to pound them on appraisal. Simply put, you're going to use the same tactics I'm trying to guard you against as a seller, as a buyer, in reverse. Keep in mind that a real estate agent who is representing a buyer has the greatest strength after the offer is accepted. Now, why do I say that? Because they can come in and pound you on repairs, and they can pound you on appraisal. And if you say yes, they win. And if you say no, then they still have the contract right where it is. So they can pound you to death. They can tell you that your grandma wears rocky underwear and you got to live with it. Because at the end of the day, if you want to sell that house, that's your only choice. So the fact of the matter is that when it comes to a real estate agent who's a buyer's agent, they know the minute the contract's signed, the leverage goes their direction. Okay, so it's extremely critical that as a seller or a buyer, you understand your strengths and weaknesses in the negotiation process. Simply put, the buyer has the upper hand after the contract is signed. Okay, so in this particular case, my broker came in and she knows that she told that agent, listen, we do not accept cash concessions, but even my broker will fall prey to concessions. Notice what I just said there. As much as I'm telling you guys what to do, and I know it all too well, and my broker does as well too, she will or he will fall prey to the exact same thing I'm warning you against now. So my broker comes back to me and says, that buyer said they want an $11,000 concession because your air conditioning stinks, your floor's bad, and this is bad, and that's bad, and all these yada yada stuff. And she says, what do you want to do? Well, my response to my broker is, never come back to me again with a concession offer or to my client. That's what I told her yesterday. Never come back to me with a concession offer to me or my client again. And here's why. She comes back and says they want 11 grand in concessions because the air conditioning doesn't work. Okay, we go back and we say we don't do concessions. Then they come back and they tell us they'll do 7,500 in concessions. And get this one, this is what really bothers me or ticks me off, in fact. Okay, my agent has the guts to come back to me, knowing it's me and my beliefs, to say they say that they'll go down to $2,000 in concessions. I heard this from my agent a couple of days ago. Hey, listen, Craig, they say they'll do 2,000 concessions. They didn't get the 11,000. They didn't get the 7,500. So now they're coming to you and they're giving you a deal at $2,000 in concessions. My response to my broker was simply this. What do you think the odds are that that buyer who wants this home and is going to move their family within the next 30 days is going to walk away from this transaction if they don't get a $2,000 concession? You know what my broker said to me after I said that to her? She said, I'll go get the deal done. Right? In other words, she quit asking me for concessions. Remember, your own real estate agent or broker, if the seller, will work against you to cost you money. Keep in mind this. This is shocking news, right? Shocking news. Your real estate agent really doesn't care how much you sell your house for. If they give away 5 or 10 grand in concession or even 20, or they get a counter on repair or appraisal, if it's an appraisal, they're going to come and tell you, hey, the appraiser told you what your house is worth. You need to sell it. And when it comes to repairs, they'd rather make the money and get their commissions than have the deal fail because you countered them on repairs. So you are going to be fighting against your own agent and broker when it comes to concession, repairs, and what's best for you financially. Because psychologically, from both broker or agent side, buyer and seller, the path of least resistance is unfortunately for you to make less money. This is Craig Brooksby with the Estates LLC signing off. Have a great and blessed weekend and day. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.